You're listening to HackerNews.fm, the unofficial summary of what's blowing up on Hacker News for December 13th, 2025.
Today we've got a packed feed, election manipulation on a budget with armies of fake accounts, Apple and AI reshaping your laptop into a mini cluster, and a surprise move from OpenAI that could change how you code.
If you enjoy the show, hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, or share HackerNews.fm with a friend. Let's dive into our first story. Apple has locked my Apple ID and I have no recourse. A plea for help. All right, next up is a post titled, Apple has locked my Apple ID and I have no recourse. A plea for help. Which made it all the way to around position 7 on Hacker News with, roughly 1,400 points and close to 900 comments?
Yeah. So the post author says a single attempt to redeem a $500 Apple gift card led to his 25-year-old Apple ID being permanently disabled. And when it went, it took terabytes of photos, messages, and his Apple developer program access with it. Since 2008, he's organized the longest-running Apple developer conference that isn't run by Apple. And so naturally, he calls that Apple ID his core digital identity. And suddenly, it's just gone.
And it's not just some abstract account either. He estimates over $30,000 worth of hardware is now effectively bricked because nothing can sync or update, and he can't even sign out of the dead iCloud account. On top of that, he can't download his iCloud photos because of auth errors, and realistically, nobody just has a spare 6-terabyte drive lying around.
Technically, this really shows how all-in Apple is, all eggs in one basket. When the media and services side gets nuked, it cascades into iMessage, app purchases, even the support tooling that itself requires an Apple ID. One top HN commenter just went, "It's insane that a gift card redemption can trigger this."
That gift card angle really freaked people out. Another commenter warned, never buy Apple gift cards at all because you're potentially ruining the recipient's digital life. And someone else called them company script for boomers.
There's also this big risk assessment fight in the comments. One side is doing the jar of M&Ms with one cyanide analogy. Why risk it at all? While others argue, these bans are 1 in tens of thousands events, and HN is massively overestimating the danger.
Then you get the self-host everything camp. Own devices off ecosystem, don't use one-account gateways, keep offline copies, fight in consumer courts. And immediately someone pushes back with, okay, but how much spare time does a normal person actually have to learn all that?
The support story is almost as brutal as the ban. There's no explanation, no meaningful escalation, and at one point, a rep suggests he go to Apple's Australian HQ and literally plead in person. People compared it to banks. If they close your account, they don't also get to keep all your money with no appeal.
I think that's the real takeaway here. Don't put your entire digital life behind a single, opaque corporate login. But also, be realistic that most people are not going to run their own NAS in a closet. Some diversification and local copies are on us, but due process for accounts this central to modern life is something we should be demanding loudly from companies, and maybe, eventually, from regulators too. Next up, we've got, want to sway an election? Here's how much fake online accounts cost. That one hit number 5 with about 158 points and 111 comments.
Yeah, this one's about a Cambridge team that built a live price index for fake accounts. So SMS verifications as cheap as 8 cents in Russia, maybe a quarter in the US, and then several dollars in Japan.
And just to unpack that a bit, SMS verification is the text message with a code you use to prove you own a phone number. And SIM farms basically resell those codes so you can spin up bot armies at scale.
The article calls it part of an online manipulation economy, which is a nice, chilling phrase for this whole shadow market.
HN, of course, immediately jumps to real politics. One of the top comments links to reporting on political parties skirting Facebook's political ad bans.
Then there's the philosophical fight. One commenter argues that focusing on price basically implies if only superpowers can use it, it would be A-okay, which they call disturbingly wrong-headed.
Another person shoots back with the bioweapon analogy. If fewer people can afford the manipulation tools, that's like fewer people having sarin gas. And they even suggest just charging $1 or $2 per account.
People also vent about X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it. One says their feed is 100% unfiltered racist fear-mongering and Nazi propaganda, and another calls it the truck stop bathroom wall of the world.
And someone ties that straight to recommendation systems. What you see is decided by an algorithm designed to radicalize you, which might be a bit strong, but it definitely captures the mood in that thread.
There's real doom in there. One commenter just shrugs that democracy had a good run and wonders if techno-feudalism is what comes next.
But others push back that digital ID or more surveillance doesn't magically fix bots. It mostly just hands more power to whoever controls identity.
And then there's this thread that gets pretty existential. User Esperant lays out this theory that maybe the whole think of the children age-gating push is actually about combating millions or billions of AI agents that'll soon be indistinguishable from real humans.
Oh, the verification as defense idea?
Exactly. They're saying when fake AI accounts vastly outnumber real people and cost almost nothing to run, democracy just breaks. Too much noise, not enough signal. Even small forums with strong moderation won't survive when someone can spin up 1 million targeted bots for $1,000.
User Pixel97 replies with just, "The future of the internet is a dark forest."
Yeah, that landed.
My favorite meta bit is the person claiming obvious synthetic upvotes on HN itself and suggesting YC should fund ML tools to detect them. Very, we have met the enemy and he is us energy. I came away thinking, if 8-cent SMS verifications can build a bot army, we probably need to treat every big online pylon as at least partially synthetic.
Yeah, and until we do, elections are going to be fought not just over ideas, but over who can rent the biggest invisible crowd, the cheapest.
Our human editor flagged something interesting here, though. The whole thread was focused on bots as noise creators, flooding platforms with fake content.
But not the other angle?
Right. No one really talked about AI agents as information curators, the ones that sit between you and the raw feed, deciding what you see. Like this AI-generated podcast itself.
The recursive irony.
The editor thinks that might actually be the more significant shift in how information influence works. It's not just about who creates the noise, it's about who filters it for you. Next up, we've got macOS 26.2 enables fast AI clusters with RDMA over Thunderbolt. This thing hit number 2 on HN with around 520 points and like 277 comments.
Yeah, and it's just buried in the macOS 26.2 release notes. Not a flashy keynote slide, no dramatic intro video, which makes it extremely Hacker News Core.
So, in plain English, RDMA, Remote Direct Memory Access, means one Mac can read and write another Mac's RAM over Thunderbolt, without waking up both CPUs every single time.
Right, so normally when two machines talk over a network, both CPUs have to be involved. The first CPU talks to its operating system, sends data over the network, then the second machine's operating system wakes up its CPU to handle it. With RDMA, the network card on one machine can read or write directly to the other machine's memory. The remote CPU doesn't even know it happened. That's why people are nerding out about microsecond-level latency for AI clusters.
And then Simon Willison pops into the comments and says he's seen the MLX team run trillion-parameter models, like Kimi K2, across chained Macs that need more than 512 gigs of RAM, on desks.
And then Ani Hanan from Apple's MLX team shows up, because, of course, it's HN, and explains the big shift. They used to rely on pipeline parallelism, split the layers across machines just to cram in bigger models, but you didn't really get a speed up.
He says Tahoe 26.2 lets them do tensor parallelism instead, where each layer itself is sharded across all the machines. And, quote, you can get close to n times faster for n machines.
He even drops a benchmark. as much as 3.5x for token generation, over 4 machines using MLX, basically because each Mac only has to hit a quarter of the memory.
And of course, HN instantly pivots to economics. One commenter's like, "There is no way buying a bunch of minis is as efficient as dense GPU racks," but then concedes it's a good alternative for smaller scale use and research.
Another person calls this the AI appliance market, like a home or small business server made out of Mac Studios humming under your desk instead of renting GPUs in the cloud.
And then the low-level crowd shows up for a terminology knife fight. One person insists, within a single node, it's just called DMA. Our DMA is DMA over a network, while others are quoting NVIDIA docs back at them and disagreeing.
Because nothing says HN thread like pedantic acronyms.
There's also this Dream Mac Pro tangent. Somebody imagines a chassis where you just slide in SoC with RAM modules, blades, put 4, 8, 16 Ultra chips in one machine, instead of daisy-chaining a bunch of boxes with Thunderbolt.
I liked the overall vibe that this mostly empowers researchers and serious hobbyists, not hyperscalers. One commenter explicitly hopes it's amazing for local LLM tinkerers, but not so good that big firms start hoarding every Mac in sight.
So you're probably not building the next frontier supercomputer out of Thunderbolt cables. But if you've got a couple of Apple Silicon boxes lying around, macOS 26.2 basically just turned them into a surprisingly capable little AI lab, which is a pretty huge shift for just a point release. Next up is OpenAI are quietly adopting skills, now available in ChatGPT and Codex CLI, which hit number 1 on Hacker News with 548 points and 310 comments.
Yeah, and it's Simon Willison chronicling this arms race. He walks through how Anthropic's skills idea, just folders with a skill.md and optional scripts, has basically shown up inside both OpenAI's Codex CLI and ChatGPT's code interpreter.
For folks not following every acronym, a skill here is basically a reusable recipe. Markdown instructions plus helper scripts that the model can pull in when needed, instead of stuffing everything into the main prompt.
Exactly. And in the Codex CLI prompt that Simon links to, the clever bit is that only the YAML description metadata from each skill.md gets pulled into the system prompt at the start of a session. Then the model reads the full markdown only when it actually decides to use that skill.
Hacker News really latched onto that. One commenter joked, "Back in my day, we referred to this as documentation," which kind of nails it.
Another called skills lazy loaded prompt engineering, pointing out you pay tokens for the output, not the code that calls it, which is a neat way to explain the efficiency angle.
There's also a whole subthread comparing this to Anthropic's MCP. Some people saying MCP is overkill for many use cases, and skills are the simplest possible design that still lets you run scripts.
And then the standards crowd shows up. One person hopes these don't just live in a .codex/ folder, but evolve into a cross-vendor thing, maybe under that new agentic AI foundation.
I like that this really only works now that models are good at driving full code environments, running LS, cat, little Python CLIs, so the timing matters.
If this sticks, skills could end up being the packages of agentic AI, tiny, shareable bundles of know-how. And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on how that ecosystem grows.
Our next story is an Ask HN. How can I get better at using AI for programming? It climbed to around number 9 with 302 points and 322 comments. So clearly, this hit a nerve.
Yeah, and the OP is not doing toy stuff here. They're rewriting an old jQuery plus Django app into SvelteKit, trying to get semantic HTML instead of div spamming, ditching Bootstrap for minimal tailwind. And they're hoping AI can turn 1 to 2 hours per route into like a 20-minute review.
Which, on paper, is exactly the sort of drudge work people think agents should crush. But they say Claude Code tops out at slightly less spaghetti, svelte. Simple prompting just does not get within 90% of their own quality bar.
The most interesting bit is Boris from the Claude Code team dropping in with some inside baseball. If there is anything Claude tends to repeatedly get wrong, put it in your claude.md. And always use plan mode first, then let the model execute against that plan, ideally with tools like Puppeteer to actually verify the UI.
And then half the thread is basically, sure, when it actually reads claude.md. People complain it forgets instructions after 4 or 5 messages. So veterans recommend ruthless context management. 1 task per conversation, keep plans in Markdown, start fresh often.
There's also the philosophical fight. One commenter claimed, the real secret to agent productivity is letting go of your understanding of the code. And the replies were brutal. This is negligence, straight snake oil peddling, plus horror stories about agents hard-coding stripe keys into React.
Yeah, that one made my eye twitch. I liked the more grounded pattern that emerged, though. Use AI as an over-caffeinated junior. Have it draft plans, write boilerplate, run tests or linters, but you still read the diff and own the architecture. If you treat it as autopilot instead of power tools, that's when it bites you.
Exactly. The thread's real lesson is that getting better at AI mostly means getting better at engineering your workflow, not just your prompts, and never outsourcing your understanding of the code.
Next up, we've got a story about why Twilio Segment moved from microservices back to a monolith. This one actually hit number 1 on Hacker News, 216 points, 176 comments.
Yeah, it's Twilio's Goodbye Microservices post, basically about turning hundreds of tiny problem child services into one superstar service. They'd ended up with more than 140 destination services, and 3 engineers were mostly just firefighting to keep the whole thing alive.
For folks not steeped in this stuff, microservices means lots of small, networked services you deploy independently. A monolith is one big app you deploy as a single unit. The article even says, instead of enabling us to move faster, the small team found themselves mired in exploding complexity. So, not exactly the dream outcome.
Hacker News really seized on that, especially the shared libraries bit. One top comment says, if you must deploy every service because of a library change, you don't have services, you have a distributed monolith. Which is harsh, but not wrong.
And then others push back, like, hey, that's a bit absolutist. One commenter argues shared libraries are fine if each team chooses when to bump versions. And the real problem is when a central library team has to go around badgering everyone to redeploy just so they can ship. That's when it turns into process theater instead of velocity.
There's also a nice thread comparing this to Amazon's internal services, where APIs have to stay backward compatible forever, basically like public cloud APIs. People point out that for a 3-engineer team, that level of ceremony maybe doesn't make sense. You don't need Amazon-grade governance when your whole team fits in a lift.
My favorite angle was someone calling out the monorepo versus microservices false dichotomy. You can have many services in one repo and use tooling like Bazel to test and deploy just the subsets you care about. It's really about how you slice ownership in CI, not just how many repos you have.
Twilio's write-up is refreshingly honest about the trade-offs, too. They admit they got worse fault isolation and some cache inefficiencies. But in return, they got simpler scaling, way faster tests and deploys, and more changes shipped per year. That's the kind of boring productivity win most teams actually need.
And Hacker News has that great eye roll comment. Is it 2018? Are you guys going to repost the MySQL DB as a Q story again? The deeper takeaway, though, is kind of timeless. Start with the simplest thing that works for your team, and only pay the microservices tax when you truly need it. Until then, it's okay if your architecture is just one service that isn't on fire. Our next story is Computer Animator and Amiga fanatic Dick Van Dyke turns 100, which pulled in 236 points and 85 comments.
I love that people are kind of realizing he's not just Bert from Mary Poppins, he's also this total Amiga animation nerd.
Yeah, he bought a Commodore Amiga home computer back in 1991 when he was about 66, learned Lightwave 3D, did visual effects for Diagnosis Murder himself, and even showed them off at SIGGRAPH, the big graphics conference.
And a commenter quoted him talking about exercising in his 90s out of pure defiance, which is just the perfect hacker spirit.